Welcome to the Future of Work podcast. My name is Frank Cottle, and today I will be your host. In this episode, we are honored to have Janet Pogue McLaurin, a leader at Gensler and the Global Director of Workplace Research. Janet will unpack the findings from a massive global workplace survey they've recently done. Janet dives into what truly makes a workplace effective, from team relationships to innovation culture, and explains why simply returning to the office isn't enough for employees to thrive. As we explore trends in workplace design and performance, Janet shares how different companies, large and small, can leverage their spaces to boost productivity. Are you getting the most out of your workplace, or is it time to rethink your space strategy? Janet, welcome to the Future Work podcast. Really excited to have you here. I mean, wow, what a resume. 42 years with Gensler.
And counting.
We even know some of the same old architects from the old days.
Yes, we do. When you've been around as long as both of us. It's a small industry.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about today, but I'd like to start. One of the things that you're focused on is data. And I'd like to start with your global workplace survey, because it was a huge, huge survey across the all variety of users. What did you find, and what's the focus that you find for this year's survey?
Well, Frank, we've been doing this for 20 years, and
Yes.
it first started with linking design and business performance, and that's what we went back to this year. And we thought it's really time to stop talking about the return to office and metrics and really focus on workplace performance. And so we surveyed, as you said, a huge sample. It was over 16,000 office workers in 15 different countries across 10 industries. And the key thing that we found is employees that are the most engaged had the strongest team relationships and work for the companies with the strongest culture of innovation. They actually have better workplaces and better work experiences. And, if you like, the Olympics just stopped, right? And the Paralympics is just getting going. And if you think about those top performers, they have better equipment, they have better training facilities. And so if we think about our own organizations, regardless of size, we have top performers. And those top performers in our own companies really do need to have better workplaces in order to perform at their personal best and collective best.
Well, it's funny because uh, having the right tool for the job is that probably has been around since the first carpenter that was working on the pyramids or something.
That's right.
That concept is not new, but it's interesting how it isn't as well practiced as one would think. And trending issues around giving people tools, and they look at it and say, "Oh, we'll give them a fast computer. Oh, we'll give them this. We'll give." They don't think about their work environment as much as a tool.
And it is.
It really is.
Space is a tool just like technology is a tool. And so, what can we do? And that was really what we've tried to uncover the last 20 years. Like, how are we really working? And how is the space either actively, contributing to it in a positive way, or that we're having to work around? Like, what really works? What is it that needs to be fixed, and what's missing that we need to be thinking about as work continues to evolve?
Well, workplace design has always been interesting, and it's always been shifting around. I mean, we think of the old sweatshops of the early industrial era, and where we've come from there.
Mhm.
Or some people say we haven't come anywhere. When you look at that, and I won't ask you to name names, but think of your top five biggest clients at Gensler. And Gensler has the biggest clients. So, these are all going to be massive international corporations. And compare, for our purpose here, are all of their workplaces spectacular? Or does one have a spectacular and one has pretty boring space? Not design wise and cool factor, but efficiency wise for giving the employees that tool. Is there really a difference, or have all of the biggest companies elevated to a 5% average in this regard? to where, Microsoft is cool, Google's cool, Facebook is cool. They're all about the same in cool factor and tool factor. And how do you get an advantage?
But every organization is different. It's I'll give you a good example. The best sailboats that race, oftentimes it's only a few people building those, but they build it to each person's specification. And so they race differently depending on that team and the conditions that they're building that boat for. And the same thing happens with workplace. Every culture is different. What they're trying to, the behaviors they're trying to nudge, what they're building for, how they're working, how their work is evolving. The physical work environment is kind of attuned to that. you know so whether it's a tech company that is building chips and leading the way in AI, or whether it's consumer goods that is head of their industry, they're all thinking about space a little bit differently. And most of these have huge portfolios. So it's not a uniform experience across an entire company. They're trying to get there, but no one has the bucks to change everything across every bit of their real estate portfolio. So they're pushing here, they're changing this, they're evolving and trying to make sure that it's as equitable as possible. But in every country, even cultural differences of how we work are evident. And so the best companies are starting to think about, well, what is it we need to do for that function in that country, given how they work? And so there's more customization that's occurring now. Whereas in the past, it used to be these corporate standards and cookie cutter approaches. Now it's very different.
Well, you bring up sailboat racing, something very near and dear to my heart, and you probably did that on purpose.
You probably planted it in my head when we talked the other day.
The very best racers in the world are match racers in a single class, where all the boats are identical. Okay, that's what gives you the best performing racer. If it's just an equipment war, then it's whoever has the biggest budget or has a breakthrough design. But it's the very best racers are the ones where everything is equal overall. And I wonder, as I look at business, where the equality is, because we have large companies that are big multinationals, doesn't matter whether they're tech or retail or whatever. Um, but about 85% of all business are smaller companies.
That's right.
So, how does the smaller company compete innovatively without the same budget overall that these large companies have? And what's interesting is, quite often, if you look at the venture capital world or you look at the private equity world, the little guys are outperforming the big guys.
That's right. That's right. Scale doesn't always mean best, right?
Always somebody comes out of the woodworks and destabilizes the big guys.
That's right.
I wonder whether it's the racer or the boat that's important.
I think it ultimately comes down to the racer and a boat that matches how they race. And that's really what comes out on top, which is fundamentally workplaces are more similar than dissimilar, right? They all have places that we come together and that we work alone, that we learn, we socialize. But the best workplaces actually have a few things that are a little different. They are better equipped, to be able to have some of those confidential conversations, to be able to have places to relax and restore in between meetings, and just like get your head back in the game from one task to another task. They're able to think about being able to do deep concentration better. So we have found that there are certain activities that really need to be thought of more intentionally, and they have better experiences. And so they're not only equipped to be effective and to be functional, but they also have better work experience. Think about it as like two halves of a circle.
I do, but I want to broaden the circle a little bit or expand a little bit. I had a beautiful office one time in an IMP building that was just spectacular and wonderful setting. I overview the ocean, all this sort of everything was perfect in the office. And yet, my favorite relaxation spot was to take a walk through a park next door.
Yes,
So the point I'm making or trying to make is that the amenities which surround a workplace are equal to, or in many cases, even greater than the office design itself.
that's right. Because that's a part of the entire experience, the arrival, what you do throughout the day, that connection to nature, right? And being able, so we think about workplaces, not just what's in the tenant space, regardless of size, but what is the ecosystem of spaces that your employees have access to. So some of those, a large company, a large campus, they may provide everything because they're building a large corporate campus. But a small tenant, let's say it has only 15 employees, they need to rely on what is it they're providing, but what else is in the building that the landlord is providing? What's across the street? What's down the street? Being able to use the park, the cafe, all these other spaces, being able to take a walking meeting, all or go to the rooftop of the building that's shared with all the tenants for, to eat lunch. Those are all a part of the experience. And when we think about like mixed use developments, we're now thinking in terms of how can we script the entire experience.
Well, it's funny you mentioned walking meetings. That was at that time and still is one of my favorite meeting formats. If
Mine too.
if
Mine
you've
too.
got a one-on-one, nothing's better than leaving the office, sitting in the park together for a while, and then taking a half hour, 45-minute just walk around the park together to generate in to get real, to be authentic in the meeting.
It's a change of setting,
Yeah, it really.
and having that choice and that variety at your fingertips makes all the difference. It keeps your energy up.
But how does we're post-pandemic now and everything. The whole purpose of business is to generate profit. We generate profits through efficiencies and improved efficiencies continually. How do you measure workforce force performance today versus, let's say, 10 years ago or even just pre-pandemic?
Well, I think different companies measure different things, right? So at Gensler, we're a design firm. And so we're looking at the impact of the physical work environment on helping people actually work better. And so we're actually measuring it back to outcomes. And we look at a number of outcomes that are individual, like your personal productivity. Um,
How do you measure that in a scientifically data scientific manner that you can draw the trend pattern across multiple companies and multiple industries?
So we have some indices that we've developed, some of which are like a culture of innovation that are secondary research that have been in the field for quite a long time that we've used over time. So it's multiple questions and we're asking about an individual's perception of the impact of the space on X, like individual productivity, their work-life balance, their speed of decision making across their organization, their quality of work at an organization, but even team productivity or strength of relationships. And so we're asking on some specific outcomes and the impact, their individual feeling of the impact of their work environment on being able to do that effectively.
Okay. You've used the word feeling about 5 times. You've
But it is a perception.
perception, um, 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 your data is coming from the individual that, and it's,
and then aggregate it up.
and then you're taking it up. I'm going to stick on this for a second. Um, is there a correlation? Because again, what's the purpose of business? Is there a correlation that you can see um, where you have the highest metrics of satisfaction, we'll call it for a moment, from the employees, and the competitive stock value of the company that they work
Yes,
for?
yes,
And
you can see it.
how do you define that?
So in 2008, when we first started this research, we started to define that. And we asked certain questions of just managers and above,
Hmm.
and we actually have company names in our data. And so, we it is very difficult to say we remodeled this space and perception went up that this is more effective and it provides better work experience, and the next year the stock of price went up. There's too many variables. But we can see a strong correlation that the most profitable companies, the most successful or innovative companies based on a culture of innovation and a proven track record actually have better workspaces and better work experience. We're able to quantify that. We see the correlations very strongly.
Okay, then I'm going to ask a chicken and egg question. What comes first, the innovative culture or the innovative workplace?
Who knows? And actually, who cares, right? Do you say that it's due to the technology? It's due to the space? Both of those are tools. It really starts with people performance. Ultimately, business performance is about people performance.
Correct.
And so, what is it that we can do to help people actually work at their best? And we know intuitively that the space or design is going to be one of those tools. But can we say which came first?
Okay, then I'm going to go down a rabbit hole with you here.
Oh, you're a tough interviewer.
Oh, that sounds cool. Great corporate headquarters, great this, blah, 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 blah. I want to work remotely because I hate commuting. I don't care. Okay. Remote work, hybrid work, which is where we're going to end up. That's really where we were. Remote work was,
We were hybrid even before.
yes, remote work has been around forever. And our own company is a good example. We don't have a C-level executive. Well, we have two C-level executives in the same state in one place. Everybody else is scattered in different states and different countries. So we have used a remote work, hybrid work model ourselves since inception. So, gosh, I go back on that 30 years. So, um, but in the norm, how do you see that same benefit applying when a person is only in the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week, or maybe not in the office ever?
So I'll answer it by looking back at history. Like, we have always been in and out the office,
Yes.
right? And we have been measuring this for quite a while. Right before the pandemic, we saw that the average in the US, just looking at the US data alone, was about 81% of the time in the office. But the most innovative, with that culture of innovation.
Into the office, our data would say that it was around 45 to 50% max time at the desk.
Oh, absolutely. We saw, yeah, we saw around 40% at the desk, but about 81% in the office.
Yeah, we came up with 42%, so we're aligned there.
Yeah, we're definitely aligned with that. But the most innovative, defined by that culture of innovation in indices, six different questions, were actually only in the office 67% of the week, and they were at their desk even less than average. And so now, when we fast forward, now we're coming back, we're seeing in our data that we only looked at office workers that were in the office at least a little bit of time. So this
Mhm.
was not full-time remote
Okay.
workers. Um, we found that they're in about half the time, only at home 20%. 30% is in all these other locations. And in fact, the most innovative were twice as much in those other locations, like third places near their home. Business travel is back. People are working in other offices. They're at their, across their company. I just got back from Shanghai and working in our own Shanghai office, but we're also at client sites, job sites, customer sites. We are out and about the same amount that we were pre-pandemic. But home wasn't normally one of those locations in the past as it is today. But that time together, like we asked, why are people coming back together? And the last 3 years, we've seen the same answer. It's to focus on my work, which is both individual. It's not to do focused work. It's to focus on getting my work done. So that involves solo work, working alone, deep concentration, as well as working with others. And so that being together is really important. And that's what builds trust.
Yeah, no, I agree with the trust issue. Although we haven't ever worked together in person, and I have a total trust in you. Uh, to your issue around third workplaces and things of that nature, and I mentioned this before when we were discussing prior to the podcast, is that we've been saying for years, decade now, I guess at least, that there is no such thing as an occupier anymore. That there are only travelers. And when we break that down ourselves, we look at the old digital nomad model. We say, hey, digital nomad. Well, that's sort of like Janet grabs a guitar and Frank grabs a laptop and a surfboard, and we go to Bali and live in a hostel, and it's we've got a gig job of some sort. We're cruising. That's the original digital nomad. I can survive and travel. Okay, a lot of journalism, a lot of specialized jobs.
Mhm.
That. And then what we break that down further, we call there's a slow mad. Okay, a slow mad is Janet decides she wants to work in Shanghai for 6 months. Frank decides he wants to work in Paris, but we both have jobs. We both work for a company. It just our job allows us to work in multiple places. And maybe in Shanghai, you work in three places: your home, a headquarters, a third workplace. Maybe I do the same in Paris, but we're slow mads. We're moving very slowly. And then we have what we call low mads. Okay. And I am definitely a digital nomad these days. I'm a local nomad. I work from my home, where I am now. I work from my local office, which is about 15 minutes away and has great meeting rooms and things of that nature for a single purpose. I have two favorite lunch restaurants and two favorite dinner restaurants where I meet people in town. I know them well. They know me well. I know the table I want. It's a workplace overall. And then I naturally go to other people's offices locally, regionally in the greater Dallas Fort Worth area. So I think our we have all three categories of that type of worker today still. Some of them are heavily impacted by design. Some of them are heavily impacted by commute. Some of them are heavily impacted by other social reasons, for other social things. As you look at design and where it's gone, considering that and what you've said, Gensler in his design recently, not just recently, but overall, has taken a stronger leadership position in focusing on wellness as a part of design.
Yes, we have.
How do you weave wellness into design and these other metrics that we're talking about to have the beneficial outcome? My outcome is always I want better stock value. I want more profitability, better stock value. Part of that, if you look at metrics, is revenue per employee. That's a simple metric to look at for a lot of companies. How do they do against their own metrics? Because they can't. That doesn't always judge well against other companies. Um, but how does wellness come into to the design factor, and how should we be paying attention to that?
It's a great question because, you know, we can't come up with a single metric, you know, or set of 4 to 6 questions that will, like, measure well-being, right? Because that's a complex, topic. If you think about, you know, I mentioned that business performance is ultimately people performance. Well, people performance hinges on well-being as well. And so we've seen it shift that it's no longer enough just to provide a fitness center or gym membership. You have to think about the whole individual, right? And since the pandemic, there's this renewed increase in priority of well-being because we realize how important that is. And like natural light and view and connecting to nature, you talked about walking meetings, have always been important. But now in design, we're seeing that indoor air quality, you know, having the ability to have fresh air, increased air exchanges so that
Excuse me for interrupting. Did the air quality issue, not just fresh air, but air quality cleanliness issue, was there a breakthrough on that that is pandemic related?
there was. There's a clearly a shift. There's this new awareness. I
Yeah.
mean, even on the airplanes, you know, now it's a very high air exchange. We're not recirculating stale air. We're trying to increase bringing in fresh air. Some of this went
You
hand in
didn't sit next to the guy I sat next to on my last flight, but that's okay.
that may be why I've got a little bit of a cold myself. But you know, it's there is a new awareness of it, but it also went hand in glove with sustainability and how we're thinking about energy consumption and how we need to be thinking about our planet. And you know, wellness, it just ties it back right down to the individual. So that's one. And
I wanna interrupt, I apologize, but, you just said sustainability, and I'm gonna go back to the 85% of small businesses. A small business that has 3,000 square feet in a building somewhere has no ability whatsoever to impact air cleanliness, to impact efficiency of energy, to impact any of those things themselves, or very, very so it's so small the impact they can have that I it's nothing. If you're building a campus, I can see the energy. If you're building your own building, I can see if you take so much of the building, you can give the landlord you only take a LEED building, you only take a well building, etcetera. You can set certain standards, but most businesses can't do that.
well, it seems overwhelming, but even small steps make a big difference. So think about the next time that lease comes up available. You can choose to pick a different building. You can band together as tenants and demand that the landlord starts to look at certain things. You know, being able to change the air exchange is not a fundamental shift in building design. That's an operational things. So there are operational and design things that you can do. But even as a small tenant, having providing the ability to have outdoor work areas, you know, up on that rooftop that's shared by the tenant and making sure the landlord puts Wi-Fi and that you can connect to it and that people have laptops. That is something in a even in a small tenant's purview to be able to do. You know, if you think about relax and restore kind of spaces, which also impact the well-being of people, you know, it's operational of how instead of timing every Zoom call to the half hour or you know full hour mark, cutting it shorter to so that people have the ability to get up, get something to drink, move around, putting hydration up front and center, you know, is something every tenant can start to do. You know, it's starting to think about adding plants, a prayer room, things that people well, whatever your employee mix really needs, it becomes really
You
important.
know, you you know what you're describing for a small tenant is the perfect shared office workspace, perfect
Could be,
the perfect
could be.
co-working center, the perfect business center, using an earlier label. You're talking about those facilities, generally the well-designed ones, and most of them are these days, are taking into consideration almost every single thing you've mentioned so far and provide it at the smaller level
Yes.
along with the flexible work model.
And many of the landlords are also trying to compete against the co-working by starting to provide these in multi-tenant buildings too. And that's where mhm,
There's a company in the Netherlands whose specialization now, and I think John's got around 20 buildings. He started this about 3 years ago. He goes into buildings and does nothing but work with the property company that owns the building to install a variety of amenities throughout the building and structures that makes the entire building feel like a community design, even though it's
yes.
just a cruddy old building. Because all those things, amenity-wise, can be added, and people love it. Those buildings are all just crushing it right now.
Yeah, and we're seeing that principle, that idea expand to office parks, and we're seeing in districts in a downtown area. It could be a small little town, but now starting to apply that for, a walking distance
Yeah.
so that everything is right there because the businesses, even small businesses, can band together to go, what are we missing? Can we leverage something? Can we add this or start to foster, pulling a business district together to kind of think about something? There's one other really important point, Frank, and that's that loneliness has never been higher. And if you talk about wellness and well-being, the social connection with other people is absolutely critical. And that's one of the things we've seen a huge spike, particularly with hybrid work or that part of the staff is remote, as you
Mhm.
mentioned before, and being able to have a place that people connect with one another is really important, even if you only have 20 people in your office space. Rethink how the reception works. Maybe it's not a manned receptionist with the formal seating area as it was years
Mhm.
past. Can we make it more an inviting space that guests can go over and serve themselves a great cup of coffee, or that employees are also using that space so it feels more like home, it feels comfortable, but it feels welcoming. And that is a place that people can start to come together and not feel like they're going to the office and then going into a room and shutting the door and trying to get work done, but
Right.
it's really a reason to come together, that shared purpose and feeling like that sense of belonging.
Well, there's so many things here. The topic, we go on for days
We could.
on this, and there's so many challenges to face, but I look back over my career. I've been in business since 1970, so close to 55 years now. 45 years of that have been spent in the flexible workspace industry. And I look at the changes of that industry, which is all about amenities, it's all about bringing these things together, have made. And the biggest major change is addresses with the human side, not just the design side. The design has always been there. The design has always been there. Amenities have always been there. Location around external amenities has always been there. But the biggest change, instead of just saying, well, we're going to have a cheap cheese and wine mixer once a month and call it networking, which is important, has been to the conscious effort to foster a stronger sense of community inside of the space, in order to deal with the neurodiversity issues, in order to deal with the loneliness, the wellness issues, and in order to create a more joyous workplace, if I can use that word. And I think that that's a major thrust forward that Maybe large companies are learning that from the flexible workspace sector, maybe vice versa, or maybe we're all learning it
Or
together.
from hospitality, from the
Hospitality,
hospitality sector.
hospitality sector, all of those things are coming together now to create a more interesting workplace.
I I agree with you.
Commuting, then we'd all be happy. So that's the next challenge for you with Gensler is to figure out how do we repurpose buildings to a higher efficiency of mixed use so that cities can be vital 24/7 instead of 12, 5. And how do we get rid of commute so that people work where they live and live where they work rather
The
than
20-minute neighborhood as we've talked about, right?
I mean, there's all these this but, we really have to come to that in order to bring everything we're talking about today into its highest level of realization.
That's right. And it's not unlike how a small town already works, right? It's taking those principles and applying it to sections or districts of a city. And I think city planning is evolving with these
Well,
ideas.
it's making the affordable housing in the city so that people
Right.
don't say, well, take Manhattan as an example. Let's see, I have a family of 4, my wife and 2 young children. I want to live in Manhattan. What do I have to earn in order to do that? To where each of my kids actually has their own bedroom, and there's a family room, not just a small living room, and there's a eating area in the kitchen, how do I actually have "Oh, no, forget it, I'm moving out to Glen Cove. I'm moving out to Long Island. I'm moving to New Jersey. I'll commute in. I'll sacrifice my commuting, whatever that is. I hate that commuting. I'll sacrifice and commute because I can't afford to live in the city. So we have to repurpose so many buildings that are can gain a higher level of efficiency with office space use overall and use some of that space for residential. That's my view at least.
That's that's the next frontier, and taking the premise that maybe all the buildings of the future are already here, and how do we repurpose, to your point.
Yeah.
And Gensler's been studying that, like what's the 100-year building? How can it morph and change? We talk about how things have evolved over our 4 decades of the
Mhm.
career. We've shifted from thinking about, how many people can you put in to a space, to
Sure.
thinking about how to make it more effective, to now thinking about the experience, right? And then kind of this shift from real estate metrics to people metrics. Now we can start to think in terms of how can a building evolve. The workplace of the future, your podcast is called Workplace of the Future. Well, that that is an elusive, it's an evolving workplace,
Right.
right? Or the workplace of the future is always out there. And cities need to evolve, the workplace needs to evolve, because we as people are evolving, and how we work and the technology and the tools we use are evolving. So of course the workplace has to evolve. There was one really interesting stat in our last research. We found that only a third of the workplaces have been redesigned in the last 3 years. 21% in the US. That is a staggeringly low number.
Surprised at that. I'm actually surprised that it's that high.
It's shocking. I mean, there's been this wait and see, and yet we all work differently, right? And we work very differently than we did in the last 3 years. And so, how do we think about the workplace? Certain things might be the same year to year, and other things need to evolve, not unlike how retail experiences evolve and change. A store is not absolutely the same every time you walk into it. And so we need to be thinking about what's evolving and changing, and how can the workplace keep pace.
Well, here's if you take that 3-year metric, of change, I could easily identify, in my opinion at least, why. And I would say, well, let's see, everybody's waiting till their lease terms out, because when their lease terms out, they're going to renegotiate their space with the landlord. The good news is they'll be able to squeeze some tenant improvements out to make those changes. The bad news is they're going to take half as much space as they currently have, as a result of which the landlord's going to be broke
Yeah.
and don't have the money for those
Did
changes.
you see the latest CBRE report that actually people are starting to expand? They got too small. They're now needing more space.
Well, that's the constant evolution versus occasional
Mhm.
revolution issue. And that's the way it should be. But I think that sadly it takes an event oftentimes to cause a revolution, which is where we oftentimes make our progress.
That's true, and we had quite the event, didn't we?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's for sure. Well, this has been quite the conversation, Janet. I'm so grateful to you for your time today. I know how busy you are, and you just got back from Shanghai. You don't look
Well,
you don't
my
look jet lagged,
pleasure,
but
Frank,
I know that
because
you're tired.
you're
Uh,
talking my favorite topic, so I get energized.
no, I'm really really grateful for that, and I'd love to be able to engage again at a time in the future and pick on some more topics with you.
Would love that.
With you. Well, thank you very much, and we'll look forward next time.
Sounds great. Thanks, Frank.
If it's impacting the future of work, it's in the Future of Work podcast by allwork.space.